The galactic explorers gathered in the vast control room, the hum of machinery blending with the tense whispers of those present. They stared at the holographic map floating before them, a map that stretched across the known galaxy. Each species had their own territories, their own star systems, all neatly marked with glowing symbols and lines. But there was something strange, something that none of them could ignore. At the farthest edge of the map, the known space ended abruptly. Beyond that point, there was nothing. No stars, no planets, just an empty void. The line was sharp and defined, like a wall that no one had dared to cross. The explorers had all heard the stories, rumors passed down through generations. They had all been told about it, but they had never truly understood. Now, staring at the map, the strange border looked more real than ever. A young alien scientist, her antennae twitching with curiosity, spoke first. Why is there nothing beyond this point? No exploration missions, no discoveries. Her voice was filled with doubt. She had heard the stories, but she didn't believe them. Not until now. Her species had mapped many galaxies, but this one boundary was different. No one had ever dared to approach it. The leader of the group, a grizzled human veteran named Captain Raycon, stepped forward. He had seen the galaxy's wonders, its dangers, and its many secrets. He had traveled farther than most. But even he had heard the whispers. He didn't need to look at the map to know the truth. He'd lived through it. There's a reason no one crosses that line, Captain Raycon said, his voice steady but carrying a weight that silenced the room. The others turned to him, expecting answers. But Raycon's eyes were locked on the map, his face grim. No one knows exactly what's on the other side, he continued. But we do know that those who tried to go past it never came back. And the ones who did, well, they say they were never the same. He paused for a moment, letting the tension settle in the air. Another alien, a tall and imposing creature with scales that shimmered in the low light, spoke up. Is this some kind of superstition? A myth meant to keep explorers away? His voice rumbled through the room. Raycon shook his head. It's no myth. I've seen the data. I've met people who've tried. There's something beyond that line, and whatever it is, it's not something we're meant to understand. The map flickered slightly, as if reacting to his words. The border was no longer just a strange, unexplained gap in the galaxy. It was a mystery, one that had been hidden for centuries. No one had dared to cross it. No one had tried to understand what lay beyond. But they all knew one thing for sure. Asking questions about the boundary was not something anyone did lightly. Whatever it is, Captain Raycon added, his voice soft, but carrying the weight of centuries of history. Everyone knows better than to ask why. The room fell silent. The explorers, eager to discover the unknown, found themselves suddenly unsure. Whatever lay beyond the human space was not something to be taken lightly, and they would have to find another way to quench their curiosity. For now, the mysterious line would remain untouched. The room was quieter now, the hum of the machinery barely audible as the explorers turned their attention to Captain Raycon. He had seen much in his years of service. His face, weathered and lined with age, held a sense of quiet authority. The stories of the mysterious boundary weren't just rumors to him. They were real, and he had lived through the fear and uncertainty that came with them. Raycon had been part of the first human fleet to venture into space, long before the galaxy had known Earth's name. Back then, humanity was still a young species, barely scratching the surface of space travel. But when they first crossed into the stars, they did so with determination and a thirst for exploration. They didn't know it then, but they were heading toward a boundary that no one had ever dared to cross. The captain leaned against the wall, his eyes focused on the map as he spoke. I remember the first time we saw that line. Raycon began, his voice low, almost lost in thought. We were excited, young, and ready to conquer the stars. The idea of exploring space, our human space, was something we all dreamed of. But we didn't know what lay beyond our reach. We didn't know what had kept others from crossing it. The alien scientist who had first spoken, a Zorathian, shifted nervously in her seat. She had a sharp mind, but this was different. She had read about the boundary, heard the stories, but hearing it from Raycon was something else. His calm tone, his steady words, made the mystery seem even darker. We weren't the first to try and go beyond that line. Raycon continued. There were others before us, alien species who had dared to approach it. They were much more advanced than us back then, with technology and knowledge that far outstripped ours. They knew the risks, but they didn't stop. They didn't care. They thought they could push through, that they could break the barrier. He paused, his eyes clouded with memories. They failed. The silence that followed was heavy. The explorers all exchanged glances. A few had heard similar stories, but hearing it from someone who had actually been there, who had lived through the early days of humanity's space exploration, made the legend feel far too real. The first ship to cross the line didn't come back. It just disappeared, Raycon said, his voice barely above a whisper. The second one, it made it farther. We thought they had found something. But when they came back, they weren't the same. They didn't talk, didn't communicate. They were different. They couldn't explain what happened to them. Raycon sighed deeply, as if the weight of the years pressed down on him. We didn't know why, but we were told not to ask, not by the aliens who had warned us, and not by our own people. There were whispers, rumors, stories of some sort of power that existed out there. Something ancient, something beyond our understanding. The captain's gaze hardened as he finished. And after that, the humans learned something important. The galaxy had its limits. We weren't meant to go beyond them. The boundary was there for a reason, and it wasn't something anyone should question. The room fell into a deep silence. The explorers, though eager and brave, couldn't help but feel the weight of Raycon's words. There were things out there, beyond the map, that could not be explained, things no one had the courage to challenge. Captain Raycon straightened, his expression dark and serious. We've learned to live with the mystery, and so should you. Some questions, no matter how much you want to know the answers, are better left alone. The explorers sat in stunned silence, the weight of the captain's words hanging in the air. No one spoke for a long time. What had once seemed like an unexplored wonder now felt like a dark, dangerous unknown. The boundary would remain a mystery, and perhaps that was the way it was meant to be. The next day, the explorers were still reeling from Captain Raycon's chilling tale. The stories of vanished ships and the mysterious power that guarded the boundary had left everyone in uneasy silence. But even though they were warned, there was one question that remained unanswered. Why was no one allowed to cross? What was so dangerous about the other side of the line? Despite the fear that hung in the air, the explorers couldn't ignore their curiosity. The unknown was a powerful force, one that no one in the galaxy could resist for long. The Council decided to send a mission, one final attempt to uncover the truth about the mysterious border. A diverse crew of aliens and humans, equipped with the most advanced technology, was chosen for the task. The mission was clear: approach the line, cross it if possible, and discover what lay beyond. The explorers knew the risks, but they also understood that the truth could be more important than their safety. As the mission ship, the Horizon, sailed toward the edge of human space, the crew felt a mix of excitement and dread. The hum of the engines was steady, but the atmosphere inside the ship was tense. Alien species who had long studied the mysteries of the galaxy looked nervously at each other, exchanging whispers about the dangers they might face. Humans, with their daring nature, were the most eager. They had always been the boldest, the most determined explorers in the galaxy, but even they couldn't ignore the feeling that something was wrong. When the Horizon finally approached the boundary, the ship's instruments began to behave strangely. At first, it was subtle: small glitches in the navigation systems and interference in the communication lines. Then things began to escalate. The ship's lights flickered, and the temperature in the control room dropped sharply. The crew members exchanged nervous glances. No one said anything, but they all felt it, the oppressive weight of the unknown pressing in on them. Suddenly, the ship's radar went dark, and a deep, resonating pulse of energy flooded the ship's sensors. It was a warning, but it wasn't like anything the crew had ever encountered. It was ancient. The pulse was sharp and penetrating, like a signal that had been waiting for them to arrive. "Get us out of here," shouted the captain, his voice panicked. The crew scrambled to respond, but the ship seemed to be caught in an invisible grip, unable to move. The pulse intensified, and the ship's systems began to shut down one by one. The crew's screens flickered and went black, leaving them in complete darkness. A sense of dread filled the ship. Crew members began to feel a strange sensation in their minds, as though something was reaching into their thoughts, whispering ancient words they could not understand. The Zorathian scientist, the one who had been the most skeptical about the boundary, gripped her chair tightly, her eyes wide with fear. She had heard the legends, but now, faced with the reality of it, she understood. This was no ordinary space. "Captain, we need to go now," one of the crew members urged. His voice was trembling, his face pale. The captain nodded, his face grim. With a surge of effort, the crew managed to pull the ship away from the boundary. Slowly, as if the invisible force released its grip, the horizon began to drift back toward known space. As they moved away, the pulse faded, leaving only a heavy silence. Once the ship was safely out of the danger zone, the crew sat in stunned silence. The screens came back to life. The lights returned to normal, but the atmosphere remained thick with tension. No one spoke for a long time. They had felt it, something beyond their understanding, something ancient and powerful. It wasn't just a boundary on a map. It was a warning, a force that commanded respect. And now, they knew the truth. Some things were meant to stay hidden. As the mission crew returned to the safety of known space, the weight of their experience hung over them. They had crossed the line, and what they found there was beyond anything they had ever imagined. The boundary was not just a barrier, it was a warning. And now, they understood why no one dared to ask why. The Galactic Summit was held in the Grand Council Hall, a massive space filled with representatives from every corner of the galaxy. Aliens of all shapes and sizes sat around a gleaming table, their eyes focused on the human ambassador, Admiral Celine. Her reputation had spread far and wide. But now, in the heart of this grand meeting, she stood alone before the council, her presence commanding attention. Admiral Celine was calm and collected, as always. Her human face was composed, but there was an air about her that made everyone in the room uneasy. She had been part of humanity's most sensitive missions, and her calm demeanor hid a sharp mind and a deep understanding of the galaxy's darker truths. Yet there was something about her, something about the way she looked at the gathered leaders, that suggested she knew far more than anyone had ever suspected. "We have all gathered here today," Admiral Celine began, her voice steady, "to discuss a matter that concerns us all, the boundary. The mysterious line that stops our maps and keeps us from crossing into the unknown." She paused, letting her words settle in the air. "But what if I told you that this boundary is no accident, that it has been there for a reason, for far longer than any of us realize?" The room fell silent. The other council members, alien leaders who had ruled for centuries, exchanged uneasy glances. They had all heard the rumors about humanity's strange connection to the border. But now, as they listened to Celine, they felt the weight of her words. "There are those of you," Celine continued, "who have crossed that line. Some of you did so willingly, others perhaps out of curiosity. But none of you have returned unchanged. The stories you tell, the things you've seen, are not simply the result of a barrier in space. There is something out there, a force, a power, that we are not meant to understand. And humanity, well, we were meant to protect it." The room buzzed with whispers. Leaders of powerful species leaned forward, Their interest peaked, but there was a hint of fear in their eyes, a recognition that something about this situation was far more serious than they had imagined. "I'm sure you all wonder why humanity has not been affected the way others have," Admiral Celine said, her gaze sweeping across the room. "Why our people can go where others cannot. Why we can live without fear of what lies beyond that line. It is because we, as humans, are the key. We are the guardians of something far older than any of us. And for generations, we have kept the galaxy's greatest secret." The council members exchanged uneasy looks. The idea that a species so young, so recently thrust into the stars, could have such a powerful role in the galaxy seemed impossible. Yet, as Celine spoke, they could not deny the truth in her words. There was a force in the galaxy, something that no one had understood, something tied to humanity's very existence. A tall and imposing Zorathian general stood up, his voice thick with suspicion. "What do you mean by guardians, Admiral? What is this secret you speak of? And why have you kept it hidden for so long?" Celine's eyes met the Zorathian's, her expression unreadable. Some secrets are not meant to be shared lightly. But when the time comes, when the galaxy is at risk, humanity will stand ready to reveal it. And when that day comes, you will understand why we have guarded this secret. The room went still, the weight of her words hanging heavy in the air. The council was left in stunned silence, unsure of what to make of the humans' declaration. They had thought they understood humanity's place in the galaxy. But now, after hearing Celine's words, they realized they knew nothing at all. As the summit continued, the leaders could not shake the feeling that humanity's role in the galaxy was far greater than anyone had ever imagined. Admiral Celine had opened a door that none of them had been prepared to face, and the galaxy's future would never be the same again. The Galactic Council was left in a state of uneasy silence after Admiral Celine's speech. Her words had cast a shadow over the summit, and the once confident leaders of the galaxy now found themselves questioning everything they had believed about the boundary and humanity's mysterious role in the universe. Back on Earth, a special team had been assembled, a covert operation meant to uncover the truth of the boundary once and for all. It wasn't just a matter of curiosity anymore. It was a matter of survival. The leaders of the galaxy had grown anxious, their once dominant positions now challenged by the possibility that humanity was guarding something far more powerful than anyone could imagine. Captain Rakan, now retired, had been called upon once again. His experience made him the perfect choice to lead this high-stakes mission. Alongside him was a team of human scientists and military personnel, as well as alien experts who had long studied the boundary, but had never dared approach it. They were equipped with the most advanced technology humanity had ever developed, ready to push the limits of what they knew and discover the truth. The mission was simple: penetrate the boundary, travel through it, and gather as much information as possible. Unlike the failed attempts before, this mission would be different. The team had been prepared with the latest advances in shielding, communication, and defense. They were ready for anything. At least, they thought they were. The journey began with tense anticipation. The ship, the Vanguard, sailed through human space, its engines humming softly as it moved toward the border that had frightened so many. The crew knew the risks, but they were driven by something stronger than fear, a desire to uncover the unknown, to answer the questions that had lingered for so long. As they approached the boundary, everything seemed eerily calm. The ship's sensors scanned the area, but nothing out of the ordinary appeared. No mysterious storms, no cosmic disturbances, just the cold, empty space that stretched out before them. The team couldn't help but feel the weight of the silence, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. The moment they crossed the line, however, everything changed. The ship's instruments went haywire, screens flickering and lights dimming. A deep, resonant hum filled the air, like a distant, vibrating sound that seemed to come from all around them. The crew braced themselves, unsure of what to expect. "Something's not right," one of the scientists whispered, his voice shaking. The team quickly noticed that they weren't alone. Strange, shimmering shapes appeared in the distance, faint and ghostly, but unmistakably present. At first, they looked like distant stars or clouds of cosmic dust, but as they drew closer, they realized they were much more. They were sentient beings, beings that had been watching, waiting. As the crew studied these beings, they felt an overwhelming sense of awe and fear. These entities were ancient, far older than any species in the galaxy, and they were watching humanity. "What are they?" a military officer asked, his voice barely a whisper. Raken stood at the ship's controls, his face pale. He had seen many things in his time, but nothing like this. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice tight. "But whatever they are, they're not here by accident." The shimmering shapes moved closer, their presence growing stronger. And then, as quickly as they had appeared, they vanished. The hum that had filled the ship faded, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. The ship's instruments began to return to normal, but the crew remained on edge, their minds racing with questions. What had they just encountered? Were these beings the guardians of the boundary? Or were they something else, something older and more powerful, that had been waiting for humanity to come close? The crew had no answers, but one thing was clear. The power that protected the boundary was far beyond anything they had ever imagined. They had touched something ancient, something that had been hidden for a reason. And now, humanity was no longer just a witness to the galaxy's mysteries. They were a part of them. As the Vanguard turned back toward known space, the crew was left with more questions than answers. They had crossed the boundary, but they hadn't unlocked its secrets. And now, humanity's role in the galaxy was more uncertain than ever before. As the ship the Vanguard drifted back into known space, the crew remained on edge. Their mission had been a failure in many ways. They had crossed the boundary, but they hadn't uncovered the truth about what lay beyond. Instead, they had encountered something they could not understand, something ancient, something far beyond their technology or comprehension. Back on Earth, Captain Raken and his team were debriefed, their minds still reeling from the events they had witnessed. As they shared their findings, it became clear that the galaxy was hiding something far more dangerous than anyone had ever imagined. The shimmering, ancient beings they had encountered were not just guardians of the boundary. They were protectors of a secret that had been buried for eons. For the first time in years, Raken found himself thinking about the old legends, the stories that had been passed down through humanity for generations. He had always dismissed them as mere myths. But now, after what he had witnessed, those stories seemed far too real to ignore. One of the legends spoke of an ancient race that once ruled the galaxy, a race so powerful that they could shape reality itself. These beings had been the creators of the boundary, using it to protect something far greater than themselves. As the centuries passed, the race faded into history, leaving behind only their legacy and the boundary they had created to keep it safe. Raken sat in his quarters, staring out into the vast emptiness of space. He couldn't shake the feeling that humanity had a role to play in this long-forgotten legacy. They weren't just explorers. They were part of something much bigger. The question was, what? He had always known that humanity's rise to power had been swift, but he hadn't fully understood why. Now, after his mission, he was starting to piece it together. The human race wasn't like the other species in the galaxy. They had something that the others didn't, a connection to the ancient power that had once protected the galaxy. Raken wasn't alone in his thoughts. Back on Earth, the scientists who had examined the data from the mission had come to the same conclusion. There was a hidden history, a secret legacy that tied humanity to the galaxy's past. It wasn't just that humans had stumbled into space and made their mark. It was that they had been chosen to guard something far greater than themselves. A secret meeting was called in the heart of Earth's military command. Admiral Celine, who had been at the forefront of humanity's rise in the galaxy, now stood at the center of a room filled with the highest-ranking officers and scientists. The discussion was urgent, filled with tension. "We are not just explorers," Celine began, her voice steady, but filled with the weight of what had been revealed. We are the keepers of a secret, one that has been hidden for centuries. The beings we encountered at the boundary were not just guardians, they were protectors. And they were waiting for us, waiting for humanity to come forward and take our place in the galaxy. The room fell silent as the full weight of her words sank in. The officers exchanged uncertain glances. No one had expected this. No one had understood that humanity's role in the galaxy was not just as an emerging power, but as a protector of something far greater. Raycon stood at the back of the room, his arms crossed, watching the faces of the leaders around him. He had long suspected that there was something more to humanity's rise. But now, seeing the concern and fear in their eyes, he realized that they weren't ready for the truth. No one was. For the first time, Raycon understood the gravity of his people's destiny. Humanity wasn't just a new player in the galaxy. They were the galaxy's last line of defense. The question now was, what were they protecting, and how long could they keep it hidden? As the meeting concluded, the leaders knew one thing for certain. The future of the galaxy rested in humanity's hands. But whether they were ready for the responsibility was another question entirely. This part uncovers the hidden legacy of humanity, revealing their unexpected role as guardians of an ancient secret. It builds on the mystery surrounding the boundary, creating suspense and foreshadowing future challenges for humanity. The mission had barely returned to Earth when the shockwaves of its findings began to ripple through the galaxy. Humanity's role as guardians of an ancient secret was now out in the open, and the political and military leaders from across the galaxy were watching Earth with a mix of fear, curiosity, and awe. They had learned something that no one had dared to even consider. The human race wasn't just a new player in the galactic community. They were the keepers of something much older, much more dangerous. Captain Raycon and Admiral Celine had barely had time to rest before the next mission was launched. This time, it wasn't just a single exploratory ship or a small crew. It was a full fleet, equipped with advanced technology, and it was headed toward the edge of the known galaxy, the boundary that had kept so many at bay for so long. The mission's goal was simple: get as close as possible to the boundary, push the limits of exploration, and try to learn more about what lay beyond. But this time, the stakes were much higher. The galaxy had learned what humanity knew, that the boundary was not just a physical line, but a shield, a warning, and something much more. As the fleet approached the boundary, the crew's tension was palpable. The ship's officers, most of them seasoned veterans, had seen their share of danger, but this was different. No one could shake the feeling that something was watching them, something beyond their understanding. No one had ever crossed that line and returned unchanged, and yet they were about to push forward into the unknown. The captain of the fleet, a tall and stern human officer named Captain Alvarez, stood at the helm of the flagship, the Phoenix. He stared out at the dark expanse of space ahead, his eyes narrowing as the first signs of the boundary began to appear on the ship's sensors. "Prepare yourselves," Alvarez said over the intercom, his voice calm but firm. "We are crossing into uncharted territory. No one knows what lies beyond. Stay sharp, stay alert." As the fleet approached the boundary, the tension grew thicker. The crew knew they were pushing the limits, but they were also aware of the danger they were inviting. The ships in the fleet were the best humanity had, but even they couldn't guarantee safety beyond that line. No one could. And then, as they crossed the boundary, the ship's sensors flickered to life, flashing warnings across the screen. At first, it was nothing more than static, distorted signals and interference. But then something else appeared. A figure. A dark, looming presence in the distance. It wasn't a ship, nor was it a physical object. It was something else. A shadow. A force that seemed to move with the dark fabric of space itself. "Report," Captain Alvarez barked, his voice tight with urgency. "Sir, we're detecting an anomaly," said the communications officer, his voice shaky. "It's like nothing we've ever seen. It's moving toward us." The shadow grew closer, and suddenly, the fleet's ships were surrounded by a chilling stillness. No sounds, no signals, just the eerie presence of the dark shape closing in. The crew couldn't explain it. The ships were still in perfect formation, but they couldn't move. They couldn't escape. "Captain, we need to get out of here," one of the officers said urgently, but Alvarez didn't reply. He was too focused on the approaching figure. And then, without warning, a powerful energy pulse surged through the fleet. It wasn't destructive, but it was enough to cause the ships to lose control. The fleet was thrown off course, and for a few moments, they were adrift in the unknown, unable to respond to the signals, unable to speak to each other. The shadow vanished as quickly as it had appeared, but the damage had been done. The fleet had been stopped. They had come face to face with whatever lay beyond the boundary, and it had made its presence known. As the fleet slowly regained control, Captain Alvarez looked around at his crew. They were all shaken, unsure of what had just happened. The mystery of the boundary had deepened. Whatever force was out there, it wasn't just a barrier. It was alive, and it was watching. "We're not alone," Raycon said as he stood at the back of the control room. His voice carried an edge of fear. "Whatever is out there knows we've crossed the line, and it's not happy about it." The captain turned to Raycon, his face grim. "What do we do now?" Raycon sighed, looking out at the vast, empty space ahead. "We prepare for what's coming next. Whatever it is, it's not going to stop watching us. We're just beginning to understand the forces we're up against." The crew stood in silence, the weight of their mission pressing down on them. They had crossed the line, and they had seen something that no one could explain. The boundary was not just a place, it was a force, and it was only a matter of time before they would have to face what lay beyond it. The Phoenix and its fleet hovered in the empty silence of space, still shaken by the encounter with the mysterious force beyond the boundary. No one spoke for a long time, the crew lost in their own thoughts, trying to make sense of what they had just witnessed. The shadow that had appeared, the powerful energy pulse, it was unlike anything they had ever encountered. And yet, despite the fear, there was a growing sense of something else, something that no one could ignore. They had crossed a line. They had entered the unknown. And whatever they had found, it was waiting for them. Captain Alvarez stood at the helm, staring out into the vast expanse, his thoughts swirling. His mind replayed the strange encounter. Whatever had intervened, whatever had stopped them in their tracks, wasn't just a force. It was something alive, something conscious, and it was aware of their presence. "Captain," said a voice from behind him, breaking his thoughts. It was Lieutenant Taro, a young officer who had been part of the mission from the start. His eyes were wide with a mix of fear and curiosity. "What are we going to do now?" The fleet's rattled. Some of the crew are talking about heading back to known space. Alvarez sighed deeply, turning to face the officer. "We don't have that option, Lieutenant. Not anymore. We don't even know what we're dealing with. We could be putting everyone at risk." Taro protested. "We don't have answers. We're in no position to go further." The captain's gaze softened. "I know, but we've already crossed the line. There's no going back. Whatever that force is, it's aware of us now. It knows we're here. And that means we have to learn everything we can about it. We have to understand it, or we'll never be able to leave this place." The crew, though uncertain, knew Alvarez was right. They had come this far. They couldn't just turn back. Humanity had crossed the boundary for a reason, and now they had a duty to uncover the truth. Just as Alvarez gave the order to move forward, a signal appeared on the ship's communication system. It wasn't from any ship or alien race. It was a strange, distorted message, one that none of them could decode. It pulsed with an eerie, otherworldly energy, almost like a call. "Play it," Alvarez commanded, his voice firm but uncertain. The message crackled through the speakers, words incomprehensible at first, but then, like a deep, resonating voice from the past, it became clearer. "Humanity," the voice said, "you have crossed the line. The time has come. You are the chosen." The words hit the crew like a wave of cold water. They exchanged confused, stunned glances. What did it mean? The chosen for what? Before anyone could respond, the ship's lights flickered, and the ship's sensors began to scan the area once more. A massive energy surge rippled through space, sending a shockwave that rattled the ship. The force had returned, and this time, it was more intense. The voice continued, softer this time, but filled with authority. "The time has come for the legacy to awaken. You are the last of your kind who can protect it." Captain Alvarez's heart raced as he realized what was happening. The revelation was clear. Humanity wasn't just part of the galaxy's story. They were its guardians. The message was an ancient warning, a call to action that had waited millennia to be heard. The boundary was not just a physical barrier. It was a protective shield, meant to keep the galaxy safe from a threat far greater than anything they could imagine. Raken, who had been standing silently at the back of the room, stepped forward. His face was pale, but his voice was steady. This is what I've been sensing all along. We've been chosen to protect something, but we didn't know what it was until now." Alvarez nodded slowly, the weight of the revelation settling on his shoulders. Whatever is out there, whatever is beyond that boundary, it's coming, and humanity has been tasked with keeping it at bay. The crew gathered around the command center, their faces a mix of disbelief and determination. The mystery of the boundary had just deepened, but now they understood. Humanity wasn't just guarding the galaxy's past. They were protecting its future. And whatever lay beyond the line, it wasn't finished with them yet. As the revelation of humanity's role in the galaxy spread throughout the fleet, a deep sense of responsibility began to take root in every crew member's heart. The message they had received was clear. Humanity was not just a new player in the galaxy. They were the guardians of something ancient, something far more dangerous than any of them had realized. The boundary wasn't just a line in space. It was a shield, a protection from a force that could unravel the entire galaxy. Captain Alvarez stood at the helm of the Phoenix, staring into the vastness of space. His mind raced with the implications of the revelation. What had humanity been chosen to protect? What was so dangerous that the galaxy needed a force like theirs to stand watch? The answers seemed just out of reach, hidden in the vast expanse beyond the boundary. "Captain, we've been receiving more signals," said Lieutenant Taro, breaking the silence. "They're not clear, but we think it's the same voice from before. It's different this time. More urgent." Alvarez nodded, his grip tightening on the controls. "Put it through." The familiar, distorted voice filled the command deck once again. "Humanity, you have awakened the legacy. The time draws near. The chosen will face the truth. The force that sleeps beyond the boundary is rising. It cannot be stopped. Only you can hold it at bay. Prepare yourselves." The words sent a cold shiver down the captain's spine. The force that slept beyond the boundary was waking up. Whatever it was, it had been lying in wait for eons, and now it was ready to make its move. The entire fleet was on edge, feeling the weight of the unknown pressing in on them. Raken, who had been standing in the corner, approached the captain. His face was lined with concern, his eyes dark with thought. "We're running out of time, Captain. Whatever this legacy is, it's been waiting for a reason. We need to be ready. The question is, how?" Alvarez took a deep breath. "We don't have all the answers yet, but the truth is out there, Raken. It's beyond the boundary. Whatever humanity is meant to protect, we're going to find it." The crew was now fully committed to their mission. The mystery of the boundary had gone from a distant curiosity to an urgent life-or-death situation. There was no turning back now. The fleet pushed forward, closer to the boundary, hoping to uncover whatever lay beyond. As they crossed the line once again, the energy in the ship's systems shifted. The pulse they had felt before returned, stronger this time. The fleet felt the power of whatever was hidden beyond the boundary. The ship's lights flickered, and the hum of the engines seemed to vibrate with the force of something ancient and powerful. The presence they had sensed before was growing closer, and this time, there was no doubt. The force beyond the boundary was real, and it was waking up. Suddenly, the crew was hit with another pulse, this one unlike anything they had experienced before. It wasn't just a shock to their systems. It was a direct wave of energy that seemed to reach into their very minds. The crew members felt a strange connection to the vast unknown ahead. Visions flashed before their eyes. Visions of stars collapsing, of planets torn apart, of something dark and massive, moving through the universe, unstoppable. The voice returned, clearer this time, as if it was speaking directly to them. You are the guardians of the line. You are the last hope. The legacy is awakening, and its power cannot be contained. Only through you will the galaxy be saved. But the question remains, will you be enough? The question echoed in their minds, a challenge, a warning. The truth was unfolding before them, and yet the galaxy's future hung in the balance. Humanity was the key, but the force beyond the boundary was a power that no one could fully understand. Captain Alvarez turned to his crew, his face set with determination. We will be enough. We have to be. The fleet moved forward, not knowing what awaited them, but prepared to face whatever it was. The legacy had been awakened. The galaxy's fate was in their hands. The fleet moved closer to the boundary, its path set by the mysteries they had yet to uncover. The strange pulses of energy that had once felt like a warning were now a constant presence. Each pulse seemed to vibrate through the ship's hull, as if the very fabric of space was alive, watching, waiting. The crew's tension had reached its peak, and every member knew that they were on the edge of something massive, something that could either save or destroy the galaxy. Captain Alvarez stood at the command center of the Phoenix, his eyes locked on the black void ahead. The unknown force beyond the boundary had been awakened, and there was no way to predict what would happen next. The message had been clear. Humanity was the last line of defense. But against what? We're getting closer, Lieutenant Taro said, his voice tight with uncertainty. He stood beside the captain, his hands hovering over the control panel as they tracked the pulses. The energy signatures are stronger now. It's almost as if the force beyond the boundary knows we're coming. Alvarez nodded slowly. It's waiting for us. I can feel it too. But we have no choice but to move forward. As the fleet passed the final stretch of space, the boundaries of the unknown seemed to fall away. The darkness was replaced by a faint glow, the source of which none of them could identify. It was as if the very fabric of reality itself was bending, reshaping around them. The pulse they had been feeling grew louder and more intense, and it became clear that they were about to encounter something unimaginable. Suddenly, a massive shape appeared before them, a vast, dark structure floating in the emptiness of space. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. The structure was both ancient and impossibly advanced, its surface covered in markings that seemed to pulse with energy. The energy was both beautiful and terrifying, and the crew felt an overwhelming sense of awe mixed with fear. They had found it, the source of the boundary, the thing they had been guarding all along. Raken, who had remained quiet throughout the journey, stepped forward, his voice full of disbelief. This is it. This is the legacy we've been chosen to protect. Captain Alvarez didn't respond at first. He was too mesmerized by the sight in front of him. The structure was not a weapon, nor was it a monument. It was something far older, far more complex. As the fleet approached, the markings on the surface began to glow brighter, and the crew felt a strange pull, as if the structure was calling to them. A new voice filled the communication channels, a voice unlike any they had heard before. It was calm, yet filled with an authority that made the crew hold their breath. Humanity, you have arrived, the voice said. You are the guardians, the last line of defense. This structure is not just a thing. It is a living entity, the core of the galaxy's balance. Its power has been dormant for eons, waiting for you. You have crossed the boundary not by accident, but by design. The time has come for the legacy to awaken fully. The crew exchanged glances, the weight of the words settling on them. They had been chosen for a reason. Humanity was the key to maintaining the balance of the galaxy, the final guardians of a power beyond their understanding. The voice continued. The force you sensed is not an enemy. It is a part of the galaxy's creation, but it has been dormant for too long. Now it seeks to reclaim its power, and only you, humanity, can stop it from consuming all. The truth had finally come to light. The boundary had not been a barrier to keep others out. It had been a safeguard, protecting the galaxy from the rise of an ancient, uncontrollable power. And now, humanity had to decide. Would they use the legacy to protect the galaxy, or would they let the power rise once again? Captain Alvarez stood tall, his voice steady as he addressed the crew. We were chosen for a reason. We've crossed the line, and now it's time to stand firm. We are the guardians of the galaxy's future. Together, we will protect this legacy. The crew, though still uncertain of what the future held, felt a sense of unity. They were no longer just explorers or soldiers. They were the protectors of the galaxy's greatest secret. And together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the structure before them pulsed with light, the fleet prepared to take its place as the final guardians of the galaxy, ready to defend the balance and ensure that the legacy would never be lost.